Hi Bob DJ, we're here in Bristol to take a look at the Play Differently Model 1. You may have seen some info out there about this mixer, but we wanted to come down today to show you a little bit more about the workflow and what this mixer is about. So without further ado, let's take a look at this amazing mixer in more detail. So here we have Play Differently Model 1. Now this is a mixer that's been designed basically by Richie Horton and Andy Rigby-Jones. They really were kind of the brains behind some of the original Zone series mixers. So this mixer really is a meeting of their two minds, and you know, they really sort of came together to say, what do we need from kind of a newer style mixer for the different performances that are out there. So they didn't want to necessarily make a mixer that was going to have digital circuitry, etc. So what we have here is an analog mixer. So we've got 6 channels here of what I would call music channel, but we've also got 2 aux sends, which are stereo, and we've also got 2 return channels as well, which are stereo. So quite a lot of the artists that they spoke with when they were doing the R&D, they did pull a lot of information from a lot of different big artists such as Chris Liebing, Luciano, etc. Many different artists were spoken with, and lots of different people were trying these out into quite major clubs, festivals, etc. So you've really kind of got really the best workflow that all of those DJs kind of came together and worked with. So I absolutely love this mixer, and it really does sound amazing. So what we'll do is give you a bit of a run through really about what it's all about and how it really operates in use. What it is basically an analog mixer with 6 music channels, as I've already said. So what's great about each channel here is the fact you've got a low pass filter on every channel and also a high pass filter on every music channel. So we just put some audio here. We've got a CDJ connected and also a record deck. It's quite a smooth curve on that, so it's not too harsh, so it's very kind of nice to work in a very sort of subtle way. It's nothing too aggressive within that, so very useful EQ. Now in this middle section of each channel we've got what we call the Sculpt. Now on the Sculpt channel we've actually got a parametric EQ, so we've got a frequency select here, and then we've got a cut and boost. Now if I put music channel up, as I turn this, there's absolutely no nuances, so you're not going to get any kind of sweep or anything unless you actually want to cut or boost that. So say for example I want to take out some of the low mid for the kick, so around 150 Hertz. Now we just cut that out, and again very musical sounding EQ. So what we've got up here along the trim, now some of the other mixers on the market, I know some people said that sometimes you'd have a record deck that was a slightly different preamp level basically to maybe the CDJ, for example, that we've got connected here. But now on this mixer they work very hard to make sure that if you're using say the RAAA preamp, that it's quite evenly matched to the CDJ. Obviously depends on what the source material is, with different mastering levels, etc. But as a rough ballpark, they're in a very similar place rather than quite a different sort of position. So again, quite useful. Now here we just got a record playing on this channel. So what I love about this particular mixer as well is the fact that we've got a drive circuit on every single channel as well. Now in use that could be really good if you're working maybe with a drum machine and you're using it more as a sort of central hub for your performance. So say for example if it's not necessarily a mastered signal but you want to add a little bit more grit and warmth, so we say, and harmonic distortion into the mix, that isn't going to basically lose your headroom. So the way it's designed is it's basically more of a foldback circuit, so when we start really pushing the drive up, maybe you've got a record that hasn't got loads of bass and you want to kind of add a bit more depth without cranking the trim. So now we've got that drive on. So I've had some real nice success with this, using it with drum machines or synths, for example, plugged in on this, but also, as I said, working with a record that hasn't got loads of low end, or maybe a track that you feel is a little bit too clean for your set, for example. So really nice feature. Now on our music channels as well, as I said, we've always got the filters always on, effectively on the low pass and high pass filter, but we've also still got a dedicated master filter as well. So all we need to do is assign that using the filter switch. So let's for example dial in some master filter stuff here, and now if we just engage the filter, see I can either turn it on here or here, on the actual turning the master filter on, or we can assign that master filter using these filter switches. Now I'm going to do something very unmusical now. If I do this, Now notice there's absolutely no pops or clicks on the filter engaging or turning off. So the way that that circuit's been designed is very much on a zero crossing. So when the audio hits that zero crossing position, that's when the filter is either turned on or off. So again, making it very, very subtle in how it can be used, or you can kind of use it, you know, be not as accurate, let's say, to make sure you don't get any kind of additional noises in that turning it on or off. So again, but what I love about using these filters, I tend to use this as more as a standard EQ, maybe, but then if I wanted to take the overall performance up, or maybe 2 different channels, turn the filter on. We've still got our resonance here as well, like you have on certain other mixers, like on the zone range. So we start pushing the resonance right up on the HPF. And I hope I turn the filter on. So yeah. So you've still got quite that familiar kind of high pass resonance, which I think is really useful when you wanted to kind of add a little bit more excitement to your filters rather than being kind of more of a utility. So that's a really nice feature for me as well. So yeah, so while we're talking about the master filter, on our return channels, now if we haven't got an effects unit set up on this, but in the same way that you'd use on, say, the Zone 92, you'd basically use these pots here to send your signal either pre-fade or post-fade. So again, useful for working with reverbs, etc. So you'll send your audio to your external effects unit, and then you can have your return channels here as your return. Now the same way that we've got this drive circuit on every channel, we've also got that drive circuit on the return channel, but it doesn't have a dedicated pot like this does. It's dedicated in the actual trim amount. So if I start pushing that trim here into the drive, now you see on this bottom section here, that's where your drive circuit basically enables. So you will kind of get quite a nice result on delays and things like that. If you're using an effects pedal or something like that, that's a really cool feature, just to kind of give a little bit more attitude to some of your delays or reverbs. And then you've got a dedicated level amount here as well. Now again, if we're working with delays and reverb, sometimes the low end you don't necessarily want to process in the same way. So return 1 and 2 also has a low cut switch here as well. So that's really useful again when you don't necessarily want to have lots of low end in your effects kind of swamping the rest of the sound. Now we can also return those effects units, those return channels from the effects units to our master filter as well. So again, all we do to assign that is use this return 1, 2 to master filter. Engage this, and then our master filter will then take control of either our music source, which is going through it, as an example, as well as our returns. So yeah, very well thought out mixer in that sense. One of the things I wanted to mention, one of the most important things really for this mixer, is the fact that it is great for people wanting to go back to back, and that's why quite a lot of the bigger artists that have been using this, etc., and why it's becoming such a popular mixer for many DJs, is the fact that when you're going back to back, you can both independently work. Now what that means in practice is you've got QA along here, and we've also got a QB option beneath. So when you're working, say for example, someone's working on QB, they can then be listening to the next set of tracks or what they're queuing, for example, while the person that's kind of in the mix at that one time, they could be on QA. Now these two queues are slightly different. So there's slightly different impedance, and also on the QA, we can select either the Q or the mix, like you'd see on other mixers as well. So again, quite useful if people want to hear a little bit of the kind of the main front of house mix coming out of our main mix. Now B option obviously only offer you effectively the Q style and a level. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the QA and QB can be used by any sort of one DJ. So if to be honest, I use the Q mode more on QA, so I'd probably use the QB, for example. You can easily toggle the QB as well, so it could be quite useful. You could also maybe assign that to send a signal out to another effects processor on the computer or something like that. So that's quite a cool feature as well. If you're not necessarily going back to back, you can use these switches to assign like a send, and then that could come back on another return, for example. The QA, you can really hear too by holding them down together, but what I would add is they won't toggle like B, so they do have a slightly different operation, but it's just worth noting that if you're coming down to look at it. Now on our master as well, we've also got a 3-band EQ, so we can engage that again using the EQ on. So you can use a standard low cut or high, again mid, and then the low. So again, if you do want to take a little bit more control and have that 3-band kind of functionality, it does have that on the master. So quite useful if you just want to quickly, instead of using a filter maybe, or use them both in conjunction with one another. It's up to you. So, but I think that's quite a useful feature again, because sometimes when you see other mixers that are using maybe an isolator on every single output, on the main output I should say, sometimes you end up sort of turning all the subs off in the club when actually all you want to do is kind of attenuate that. So they're very musical in the cut and boost. So on the master EQ it's a -20 dB cut, and the plus goes to +6. So again, even when you start really pushing it, you're not going to fry your subs, but you're getting a nice bit of kind of response really from that. So again, quite a lot of people really favour having that 3-band EQ as just a little bit of an extra way to take your mix even further. On the booth output, we also have a EQ high frequency and a low frequency control as well, and a dedicated level like you'd expect to see on a booth, which again, the sort of thing you'd normally see on a digital mixer, but this is actually built into an analog mixer. So say for example, certain DJs prefer a lot more bass in the booth. Sometimes you might come into the booth and you've got too much bass going on. You can easily maybe turn down the subs without having to contact the engineer, or in the same way, if the person on before you hasn't had as much bass as you like, you can easily just boost it a little bit, just to give you a slightly different sculpted sound in the booth. Quite useful again, because every booth is very different, especially when it's like a major festival or something like that. Lots of different types of artists. So it's very useful for people to be able to take control of that. So that EQ is always on, and then you can easily sculpt your mix from there, which is very, very good. So yeah, we've covered pretty much the majority of that section of the mixer. So the faders are some of the nicest faders actually, I think, on the market. They're like silky smooth, 60mm throw. So yeah, I just think these are 600mm throw. I just think this is a really fantastic way of working. They feel completely smooth to work on, and again, like very, very subtle. Obviously, one of the key things that you're probably aware of already is it doesn't have a crossfader, but personally, and probably a lot of the DJs that were using this, a lot of those crossfaders were probably deactivated and turned to off position anyway. I mean, where iMixes tend to layer in different things and then bring different signals in a more sort of conventional mixing desk way, if you like. So we've got 2 mix outputs. So we've obviously got audio coming through here. For my we're using this as the booth really, and then our record signal's actually coming out of mix 2 here, which is quite neat. So that's pretty much standard as you'd see on mixes like the Zone 92, for example. But on the top here, we've got a 3.5mm output for the record output. Now that really is a neat feature again as well. If you're maybe using like a location recorder and you wanted to be able to maybe record your set, you can easily connect that up without having to look at the back of the mixer. So that's very, very good. To find out more about this mixer and to really have some hands-on time with it, please do book in with the BOP team here in Bristol to be able to take you through this mixer and book in for your demo. It's not necessarily something that you're able to buy via the website, so you really need to come down and see it in person and speak to the team. For more information about the product, do check the link beneath this video, and I hope you've enjoyed today's demo.